Hey everybody, welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. You may or may not have noticed that today's episode is landing a little later in the day than usual. In the past week, Leigh-Ann and I have had some exciting things going on that have required us to give most of our time to. So, at around 10:15 last night, I was faced with a choice. I could either start editing the episode, or I could get some much-needed rest and publish it a little later today. I chose to go to sleep. I needed it. Thanks for being patient and gracious with me while I got it ready. This week's guest is Lucy Davidson Wright. Lucy is a therapist here in Nashville who specializes in working with people who haven't had the best relationships in the past and are committed to changing that. So, let's not waste any time and jump into today's episode. Dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Well, Lucy, welcome to the theater. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on.
Thanks for having me.
I like to start out every show with asking my guest why therapy.
The short answer is I feel like it's what God made me to do. It was something that was always on my mind. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a child psychologist. I grew up in a small town. That was the only words that I knew for something like that.
Where did you get the idea of child psychologist? Like, that's such a subsectioned...
Yeah, probably TV. I don't even know that I wanted to do anything with children, but I think as a high schooler, the thought of working with adults was just something I didn't really think about. And then somebody asked me why I wanted to do that, and I said, well, I want to help people. Mm-hmm. And they said, if you want to help people, you need to go in the education system. And I didn't really have anybody else speaking into my life at that time about careers, and nobody in my family had gone to college. And so I was like, oh, okay, education. Now I'm on this track. And so went down that and thought that I eventually wanted to be a guidance counselor. And then I was done with undergrad and was like, I don't want to do any more school right now. So then I had several jobs, ministry and working at a university, and the part that I always loved was the one-on-one, and bumped up against a couple of situations where, you know, I could love kids or college students, but there were points that I felt really limited and I needed more tools. And so just finally moved to Nashville and felt like it was a good time for me to go back to school. So finally figured it out and landed where I really ultimately originally wanted to be, even as a 16-year-old.
Okay. Where'd you go to school? Grad school?
Lipscomb.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it about? I mean, was it Lipscomb that brought you to Nashville?
No.
What brought you to Nashville?
Change of scenery is
Okay.
the easiest answer. I had come 2 years prior with some girlfriends on a girls' weekend and fell in love with the city. Grew up in a really small town. And
Was
then
it a bachelorette?
No.
Okay.
Before
Were
that
you
whole...
a woo girl?
No.
Okay, so not like a pedal cart woo.
No.
Okay.
I mean, we did go to Broadway, and at the time loved it. Broadway's a little too crowded for me now, but loved that it was kind of a mix of small town and city, my two worlds that I really floated back and forth between. And then we did do one of those like comedy bus tours, and we were on it, and my maiden name is Davidson, and I saw Davidson on the courthouse, but I didn't realize it was the courthouse. I'm like, why is my name on that building? And I was like, Nashville's in Davidson County? The city is really calling my name. And so, like, from there, one of my friends and I, we were like, all right, in 2 years, if we're in the same jobs and not in relationships, like, let's consider moving. And so it just so happened that 2 years later, I was in a position where I was finishing up a residency at a church, hadn't really found my niche there. I was going to be looking for a new job anyway. And I'm like, well, I might as well look in a different city. So I decided now that was the time to move to Nashville. But my friend was in a relationship at the time, so she stayed.
So you made the jump?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you know anybody here already?
I had actually had some friends from St. Louis that moved down at the time, or a little bit before me. They were in a band, and we're gonna do that whole thing. So technically, I did. I had actually prayed, like, all right, God, I'm gonna need a roommate. I'd always had a roommate, knew that I probably wasn't gonna have a job to be able to afford a place by myself. So that was my prayer. And through some different circumstances, I'll spare all the details, a roommate pretty much landed in my lap.
Wow.
And I had a phone conversation with her, and we decided I would come down. And I'm like, so am I coming down to see if we can live together, or are we coming down, like, is this a thing? She's like, no, I think we're good. Like, I think we're going to come down to, like, find a place. And I was like, all right, I should probably call my mom and
was
tell
she
her
not already here? Like,
she was already here.
Okay.
But she was going to be looking for a roommate and moving, like, the exact same time that I was thinking about moving.
Wow.
So, like, the timing, the personalities, all of those things just really lined up.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, here we go. So I moved here without a job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Kind of came on faith and found a job a week later, thankfully. So, yeah.
Huh. Who would have thought, just by seeing a courthouse,
right,
that you would
change my life? Thank you, Davidson County.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said earlier. You said because you think that God made you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? That's an interesting statement. So, like, how do you feel like that God made you that would lead you into it?
The way that I feel when I'm with people, I feel really at home. I get a lot of gratification, I guess.
Fulfillment?
Maybe. Fulfillment. Mm-hmm. That's probably a better word. Through just being with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get feedback from people, and, like, it's probably true of a lot of therapists, but have had people say, like, throughout, like, you're my safe person. I feel really like you're the only person I've ever talked to about this, like, those types of things. And I've always been like, I don't know why, you know, like, it wasn't ever anything that I was doing. But I always knew that I felt honored to hear their stories. And if they wanted to figure out, like, what are next steps, like, that's fine. I'll help to do that, and really loved that as well. But just being with people in the hard things, whether that was, like, crying through things or talking through things or whatever, like, I was always pretty okay with that.
Yeah. So I'm hearing fulfillment. I'm hearing that you were validated kind of in your expression of it. And it sounds like, as far as, like, I don't know if I'd say it's skill, talent, whatever, but that you're not afraid of other people's feelings, that you can sit with them in the good, in the tough, and really be with them. That's cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like a therapist.
I hope so.
So what, in being a therapist now, do you have a specific population that you work with? Do you do a specific type of work?
It's pretty general. My favorites, though, I think maybe with a lot of people, not everyone by any means, but people with similar stories to what I had. So people who, I love relationships, kind of have always been really interested in them, read books about relationships, and people who either can't make them work, choose the wrong people but don't know why, maybe had bad examples from their family and want to make changes. I think a lot of that is connecting back to self. And so whether it be people who have come out of a divorce and are trying to discover themselves now, people who are young adults figuring out relationships, oftentimes pretending to be somebody that they're not in order to try to win relationships, and how that doesn't work, like figuring that out, connecting back to themselves, figuring out who they really are. and helping them to know that that's okay. Those are some of my favorite works, but I also work with marriages, anxiety, do a lot of emotional work, identifying that, come from things from an attachment lens, and do some IFS, which I love.
Okay. So relational attachment, do you do EFT at all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just took that externship
in
nice. December.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I've done that.
Yeah. So still figuring that whole thing out and incorporating it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But obviously love the concept, emotions, attachment, all of those things that are involved in that.
I'm continually surprised at how attachment seems to just be a wave that's cresting.
Yeah.
Like, I've met therapists who have been in practice for a long time that ask me like basic questions about attachment. I'm like, really? And then, I think one time they said something along the lines of like, well, you just got out of grad school. So of course but I was in it,
sure. Sue
X
Johnson
amount of years
wasn't
ago.
so popular back in the day.
Yeah. She was at Trevecca, I want to say my last year there at the Issues in Therapy conference, like 17, came and was the main keynote speaker, maybe 16. I don't remember. But, yeah, she was kind of cool to listen to.
Yeah.
So you're an MFT, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about, relationships a lot in that kind of that work that you do now. Did you know that was the kind of work that you wanted to do when you got started? Is that why you went the MFT route?
It is. So I didn't know what all that meant when I started looking at counseling, like LPC, MFT, what in the world does that even mean? And so when I moved to Nashville and had pretty much decided on Lipscomb and was checking out programs, I went to the information night for the LPC program and the information night for the MFT and asked like some of the faculty there, I'm like, what is the difference? And they said, basically you see the same people, but whereas LPC would come at it like this, MFT is going to come at it like from systems and from family, that type of thing. And I'm like, oh no, that's what I ask. Like naturally with people, just like, oh, are you close to your parents? What's that like? Da da da. So very much, I was like, immediately once I found that out, I'm like, MFT is it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember asking my therapist when I was a client and I realized I wanted to go to grad school for it, like which way. And he said something about, well, what were the letters on my card? And I was like,
yeah,
PhD. And he's like, yeah. He's like, the letters don't matter. Like in the end, you're still going to do the same thing. You see the same people.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you understand people or how you think change happens, and for me, the thing that got me into therapy kind of surfaced in the context of a relationship and the change that I was able to see in myself, relationships, even like an intrapersonal one of my relationship with myself, kind of the change took place in the context of relationship. So for me, like the marriage and family therapy worldview, the track was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I also think if I wanted to go like a little bit more of a pathological route and I was more interested in like diagnosing and things, I would have gone LPC.
Yeah.
That seemed to me a little more like Law and Order, like a little more like I'm seeing a mystery and I'm going to solve it. But
yeah,
I think as far as like actual change, the relationships route was the one that I wanted to go down.
Yeah, I've heard people are hurt in relationship and they heal in relationship. And I just really believe that.
And I think, you and I were talking before we started recording about clients that'll come in and their presenting issue that they give us is, I want to get unstuck, or I've got this anxiety and I can't figure out what's causing it. And then, we ask a couple of questions and it's pretty clear, like, oh, we've got this unresolved thing way back here. Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Nope. They don't want to touch it sometimes. Yeah.
It's like the rose and Beauty and the Beast, hey, this is what has happened. This is what we need to look at. Let's take that glass case off.
Yeah.
And I found sometimes in my work that it's just a matter of you know, going long enough to where they can know that they can trust you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of my frustrations in my internship was I had several people that in the last session before I graduated, in the last 10 minutes, dropped this big bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what in the world? We could have done something, you know, with that. And I was lucky enough that one of them followed me into private practice.
Yeah.
I wasn't lucky, but I mean, like, it was, I've really enjoyed being able to continue that.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you explore the externship?
Because I believe in attachment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think giving up a bunch of rules to couples, like, hey, try this, always works if there's something deeper that they're not, that they're ignoring or that they're not noticing. There are wounds that we all have, and I think EFT gets to those. So I think that's really important. Part of my story is that my parents divorced.
Mm-hmm. Same.
And so when I was thinking about counseling later in life and figuring out what that looked like, marriages were definitely something that I wanted to concentrate on. But as I was going through grad school, a lot of my own unresolved issues came up. And
yeah, isn't that funny how that happens?
Oh, gosh. Grad school was at, like, 2 years of constant, like, looking at your stuff. I remember that one semester we were just reading book after book, and I'm like, this is my family in black and white, and, like, how dysfunctional were we? Not really, but you know, we had our issues that I ignored for a long time. Yeah.
Did you guys have to do? We had to do a presentation on our person of the therapist stuff.
No.
So, like, we basically had to do our own genogram.
Oh, we did genogram.
And then, and this wasn't like a big classroom presentation. It was just with an academic advisor, and there's like 4 of us in the room, where we had to basically talk about, here's all the stuff that could come up inside of me in a session.
Yeah.
And I think we even had to show tapes of if something came up in a session, like, here's what it looked like, here's what I did, here's what it was.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. No.
I think that would have been helpful for me because I just didn't see couples in my internship. Because I knew that I couldn't sit with, I'm like, if certain circumstances or a certain type of person or whatever showed up, I don't think I could sit with them. Yeah, very triggered. So, I mean, I never tried it, but I just knew because I was triggered all the time working through some of these things. And so knew all about couples, but actually working with them was something that I hadn't dove into until I started my private practice later on. So EFT is just another, not just another, but it was a really great practice that I believe in, that I knew I wanted to. I mean, I can talk about attachment with single people, and I'm familiar with that. So attachment within relationship and how that works.
And certainly you could act as an attachment figure, but like to have the people in front of you where they are each other's primary.
Right.
That's a different kind of. And I liked the externship because it was a chance. What was it, 4 days long, something like that?
Yeah.
It was a chance to, because we had gotten EFT in like little bursts in our marriage therapy classes. So it was a chance to kind of sit in one modality for a bit. And it was like the combination of classroom and laboratory, because you get instruction on it, but also you role play it. And also they do like live therapy where they have a couple in another building that they broadcast over in a real session. And so it was just kind of like because I don't know how they did classes at Lipscomb. For us, each class only lasted 6 weeks, and it was like an 8-hour, 1 day a week class. Yeah. So it was kind of this breakneck pace. And if you wanted to kind of deep dive into it, you had to be okay, like extracurricular time,
right?
You know, personal time doing the deep dive.
I think that's true of like all programs and all theories, because
Really?
you're kind of doing like a drive-by of here's all the theories, have a little taste of them.
Mm-hmm.
After you graduate, you can decide what you really want to use and
Yeah.
dive into and get better at.
Yeah.
I think that's the way.
Which after I graduated, I just decided on a nap. Like I just needed that at the end of it. But I liked being able to sit in something for longer, and not just in an academic way, but in a, you guys gave us these X amount of points. Now I'm going to turn to the person to my left and practice them. Now we're going to watch a pro, actually put it into practice.
For me, that's one of the best things, is like seeing somebody who's good at it put it into practice after you can kind of identify what they're doing and say, okay, here, or what the theory is, and then like, oh, put it into practice. Here's what it looks like, was really helpful. I could just watch video after video of people doing good therapy. Which,
I mean, if anybody's listening who, that was kind of academic, I guess. It was kind of therapy talk. So like, obviously that's not the target audience we're after, but if you're a person who is interested in mental health or interested in relationships and who maybe isn't a therapist, basically, what we're talking about is everybody in relationship to other people, there's always hurt. You put two people in a room together, there's going to be hurt.
Wounds.
And there's going to be hurt between them, but there's also hurt from the past, from other people.
Yeah.
And truth be told, all of that stuff in the past affects us in the present.
Absolutely.
It's what made us who we are, good, bad, ugly, beautiful. And sometimes in our relationships with our partner, with our primary attachment person, we hit these things called attachment wounds, where some hurt happens that's big. And it could be big because of the thing that happens between the two of us. It could be big because it reminds us of something way back there.
Yeah.
And it's different than a regular hurt. A regular hurt can happen. We can talk about it. I'm sorry. We move past it. With this one, because it's so big, it's almost like it hits a pause button. And it stops the relationship from being able to progress. And I've had clients where, there's been an attachment wound years ago.
Yeah.
And they've just kind of been existing in this purgatory state for that whole time. And so what has to happen is you have to be able to go back, find where that wound is, and then what EFT does is it helps to provide a framework to where you can kind of see how a couple fights, kind of how they exist. We call it process versus content. Content means what is the subject of the fight. You put the toilet paper on where it comes out on top instead of on bottom or whatever,
You didn't take the trash out.
Yes. Versus process is how you do the fight. So EFT kind of leans into the process part. And with those attachment wounds, that wound cannot be healed unless something happens to correct it, unless something happens to where the hurt party feels like they're heard and understand and are understood.
Yeah.
And the offending party, the party who did the hurt, kind of takes in that information of how the person felt and then, does a reach.
Yeah.
And what EFT does is it just provides the framework for that to kind of happen in. And it's something I use it in my therapy, in my practice. And I think that its concentration on attachment is something that I think a lot of people are coming online to. And I think I'm starting to see a lot of stuff pop up about EFT and individual work too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of cool to be able to see that it's not just a matter of it only works when you have a couple client that looks this way, but rather it's flexible enough to where it can work with attachment with anybody. Cool. So let's talk about a movie.
Okay.
What movie did you bring today?
One of my favorites, The Proposal.
The Proposal. Yeah, I love that one too.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind when it comes to that movie is always the campfire scene, though.
Oh, hilarious. Dancing.
It's always the
song
campfire
gets
scene.
stuck in my head after that. Yeah.
It's not. It's a song that I feel like starts by, if it's in your head, you're singing it very low to yourself, and pretty soon the volume has increased, and then you become aware that you're in public.
Right. Well, then my body wants to do her dance moves.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm like, you definitely probably shouldn't do that at the grocery store if it gets stuck in your head.
I think it's okay.
But
I
it's
think it depends on
memorable.
what aisle, though.
Yeah, maybe. Cereal aisle, okay.
Yeah, I think produce is fine, but when you get to like the pharmacy, maybe you got to calm it down.
Yeah.
Sensitive conversations are happening over
that's
there.
That's probably wise.
And you want to honor those. So what is it about this movie that made you pick it?
Oh, so many things. I remember when this movie was first coming out, and I'm like, oh, another romantic comedy. And they always just seem to disappoint. I love them, but they just oftentimes, they're like, oh, that was good, but it's not like my new favorite movie. And I remember having low expectations again because I love Sandra Bullock.
2009 is when it came out?
Yeah,
Holy cow.
It's been a while. It's been a minute.
That's 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And there are a lot of rom-coms coming out, I feel like, at that time. Or had been. And none of them were my new favorite movie. Hadn't had a new favorite movie for a really long time. And
Up until then, had you had a rom-com that was like, you loved it, it was yours?
My Best Friend's Wedding.
Really?
Yeah. I think partly movies for me become my favorite when I can identify. And so...
Oh, who were you in that one?
I was Julia Roberts. I was always the friend who had a crush on my friend. Like, that was my story for a long time. Like, more than once. So it was, oh, that's me in the movie, even though it had a really sad ending for her anyway. Yeah. I remember the first 2 times I saw that movie, like, bawling, like, just crying. I'll date myself. I was senior in high school, I think, when it came out. And then I watched it again in the lobby of my freshman dorm at the beginning of the year, and like was so glad the lights were off so nobody could tell I was like tearing up. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that was up until, did this movie then, after you saw it, become?
I mean, I think it joined it.
Okay.
It didn't necessarily replace.
Okay.
But it became, well, first of all, it's just funny.
It is funny.
Ryan Reynolds is killer, sarcastic, hilarious. And I think I fell in love with him during the movie too.
Okay.
So I think that was part of it.
Yeah, he's Just Friends is on my top of Christmas movies.
Oh, that one too.
List. I love that one.
Yeah.
But there's even I mean, and I'm searching, of course, like the Deadpools and stuff. But like, I used to love Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place when it was on TV.
I never watched that.
Yeah.
He was not on my radar at the time.
He's pretty much he doesn't really play characters. He's pretty much Ryan Reynolds with whatever fake name the part requires him to have.
Yeah.
Doesn't change that much. So what is it about this movie? I mean, did you see yourself in this one as well when it came out?
Yeah, to a degree. I think the more self-aware I've become, the more I can tell that that's maybe one of the reasons that I liked it. But so part of my story is I didn't get married till I was 38. And so in 2009, even 10 years ago, was a little bit older than maybe some of my friends, definitely people from my hometown. A lot of them were getting married, and kind of felt like in the end, like there's this line, right, when he comes back, and she was like, there's a reason I've been single for so long. I'm comfortable. And she's like, it would be easier if I just go. And I think I remember kind of in some ways relating to that, and being like, yep, I know how that feels. And so I think that's one of the reasons, like her progression from being so uptight and protecting herself and hiding behind her job and her reputation and all of those things to being undone by being loved and being able to experience that, and being provided a safe place that is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love like the deeper meanings
Yeah.
in that movie.
Both tangibly beautiful and intangibly beautiful too. Because I mean, you know, the place in Alaska where they were at, oh my gosh, gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
But also just the family, mom and grandma, and the community that she. I watched the movie when I got up this morning.
Yeah.
I had forgotten that Oscar from The Office was.
Yes.
So I'm like sitting on the couch drinking coffee with the dog next to me, and then, you know, he's up there doing a stripper thing, and I, you know, spit take all over the dog.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Which was great.
Very different in that movie.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to pretend that when I see an actor that's in one thing, but I know him from another, that it's the same world. So I like to just pretend that it's actually the same character, and that The Office is his day job, and then he goes up to Alaska on the weekends. And yeah. What I like what you said about how when she said it would be easier, I think the part that I really like after that is his response was like, yeah, it would be.
It would be easier.
And yet let's still choose to walk forward.
Absolutely.
Because I think, and as I'm sure you found, sometimes easy is not the most rewarding. Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
So when the movie came out, I think you said this, did you come online to like that, identifying with her in that way when you saw it?
I think I identified that I loved the story. I think there was a part of me that wanted that. She and I are very different in the ways that we protected ourselves, but like also knowing, like relating to that a little bit, but also not even so much that probably. I probably was less aware of that at the time. But more of this, she changes in the movie and it's just really beautiful. And like, I wanted that to be my story, you know, like elements of it.
So was it that you saw a potential roadmap? I don't know about roadmap, but certainly a potential result that maybe gave you, I don't know, some hope?
I don't know if I get hope from rom-coms. Because I think at the time I still knew like they're unrealistic. But I think the ending probably did stand out to me. Like even in 2009 of she was worth it. And even though you're older, there can be this potentially happy ending. I don't think it was a roadmap.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to blackmail somebody. I always said after watching
not
Hallmark
a to-do,
movies,
not a to-do.
Right,
it wasn't
right.
a to-do list.
Yeah.
It was you know, like you're looking down at the map and you see, all right, there's a point A and a point B, and there is a way to get to point B. That doesn't mean you have to go. It's when you pull up, you know, maps on your iPhone and you hit directions, it usually gives you 3 different ways.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one way. Certainly you could blackmail an employee for a visa and fall in love with them. But, you know, there's other ways. That's fine, too.
Yeah, other ways. I don't think I was, honestly, I at the time in 2009, I don't think that I was aware enough. I've done a lot of work since then on myself. And so I don't know that I would have been able to articulate why I resonated with this movie.
But something inside of you did.
But something inside of me did.
Yeah. I think, so I'm in the same boat with you. We got married in 2017, and I was 36. And I remember I always get reception and rehearsal mixed up, which, so at the rehearsal dinner, one of my uncles, there was like a toast happening, you know, and somebody said something about, you know, me finally, you know, finding, you know, somebody. And one of my uncles was like, yeah, we thought it would never happen. And I piped up because obviously, you know, I felt a little hurt by that, felt a little shame by that, but I piped up and I said, you know, sometimes finding the right one, you got to search a little longer.
Yeah.
And certainly, and I've said many times on the show, you know, with Leigh-Ann, I think if I'd have met her a day sooner, that I don't know if it would have happened because I wasn't ready.
I tell my husband that all the time. If I had met him 6 months before and maybe a day before, I was like, I would have run the other direction. I would have ran away from you.
Yeah.
You scared me.
So that's interesting because I've had tons of clients that have said that before. Can you talk a little bit more about you scared me? And not it doesn't have to be in a personal way, but like,
yeah.
What does that mean?
I didn't know that it scared me. That's where some of my work came in, is I would find reasons of just not being attracted to this stable guy. I would not be interested. If I was interested, I realized after the first date I would build walls. Because I remember saying this with my counselor many years ago. On one hand, I can tell you I'm really great, and I can really believe in myself and think that why wouldn't you want to be with me? And then there's this other part of me that says if you really got to know me, you wouldn't like me. And so those parts were at war. Now I know that I probably had been towards anxious attachment. And so really was worried about people leaving, and then started to feed on the drama of being in a relationship with somebody with a withdrawer or with somebody with avoidant attachment. So inconsistent, would pull away, and I would think as a fixer, like, they need me because I'm okay. Like, I'm strong enough, I can handle this. Like, other girls wouldn't be able to handle this, and they need somebody to love them too. And so I'd like make up all these reasons and excuses, and like they just need time to figure it out. And so what I didn't realize is that I was scared of somebody who was secure, because when you're constantly chasing somebody, they don't have time to turn back and look at you, or they're not interested in it, or you don't have to face that. And so there was no intimacy, which I think is amazing that it actually means intimacy. And I didn't want anybody to do that. I didn't know that I didn't want anybody to do that, but that's what I was acting on.
You wanted to give without having somebody turn back and really see, where is the give coming from? How can I give to you?
Yes.
Because if somebody's going to give to you, it means that they get to see what you need.
Yeah.
And what you need comes from what you feel, comes from vulnerability.
And I had never been allowed to need.
You'd never been allowed to need?
In my mind, that's the way that I worked.
Because needing is scary.
Needing is scary. And so my story is my parents divorced when I was 11, and I had to make sure both parents were okay.
Did you continue to have a relationship with both parents?
I did. The relationship changed with my dad when he left. He remarried pretty quickly after. So it was just very different. And, you know, my mom was going through a hard time, and I was the youngest, and I was at home the most, and so it was just me and her, so I got to see all of that. And I really did think that I was okay for a really long time. I was like, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm just going on about, you know. And it was not until probably my late 20s, early 30s that I even started to realize how it had affected me.
Did you feel like I've got to stay strong for them?
I don't think that it was conscious.
Yeah.
But I think that that's what I did.
I know. So like my parents split many times. The first time was when I was a sophomore in high school. And for me, it wasn't necessarily, so like I took on the role of the lost child. So like for me, it wasn't, I want to be strong, but it was, I don't want to do anything that's going to add to the pile. So I will become invisible so that I don't make things worse?
As a 9 on the Enneagram, I think I wanted everything to be peaceful, and I wanted everybody else to be okay.
Yeah.
So, like 9s can often walk into a room and like get a feel on the room. And, my mom, of course, like went through a bit of a depression, and she was always present for me, but I also saw her pain and lived with that. And so definitely didn't want to add to that. And I was very in touch with my dad's guilt over leaving and didn't want to add to that.
Yeah.
And so, so I was oblivious to my own feelings because I was very in tune
You were
to
in
everybody
tune
else's.
with theirs.
I was very in tune to theirs.
Yeah.
Not mine.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That you were able to see their pain.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier about feeling like God made you to do this. Mm-hmm. It's because you can tune in to what other people are feeling.
Yeah.
And I what's interesting about that too is that I think that all of us who do this for a living, we have the potential for the danger of tuning in at the expense of ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's why I think so many therapists, we talk to each other and even to ourselves a lot about self-care because it's, okay, I cannot, or I don't want to get to the place where I know more about my clients' innards than I do about my own.
Mm-hmm. I think that the work that I did prior to grad school and then in grad school was so beneficial.
Yeah.
I had a therapist while I was at my internship because I think I was lamenting over a breakup, what I call a pseudo relationship. We were never quite official. Mm-hmm. And I was like talking about like how he needed somebody like me and, and she said, when do you get to need? And I remember that was like a sucker punch. Like I had a visceral reaction to that. And I'm like, oh, something's there. Because I had never thought about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was totally.
Also, that sounds very two.
It does. Well, 9s morph into different, so I scored high 7, 2, and 9. Mm-hmm. I think I settle into a 9, but definitely scored higher.
Well, and I think, all of the parts relate to each other. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just because we feel we identify with one doesn't mean.
Right.
Because in a completely, I don't want to say completely healthy, but like in a perfect person, in Jesus, all of the parts are integrated into one, person.
Yeah. Well, there's tri-types too. I mean, if you get like farther down into the Enneagram, so many subcategories.
Yeah. Wings and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm still learling about all of that.
Me too.
One of these days, maybe I'll get to sit with somebody that can just rattle it all off. I have been with a few people that rattle it pretty quickly though, and they just say the numbers. I'm like, I don't know what the numbers mean. You got to tell me. Tell me at least the phrase, the descriptor phrase.
What's the 2, the giver? Oh, okay, now I get ya.
Yeah, I'm a 6, the loyal skeptic.
9, the peacemaker.
Yeah.
My husband's an 8, the challenger. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you talk about like feeling other people's feelings and being very in tune to them, he is not. And I often wonder, what is that like to not think about like what everybody else is thinking and feeling?
Yeah. Here's what I wonder is and this is kind of like before we started recording too, we were talking about my kind of realization of looking at somebody and knowing their type and, kind of hero worshiping them and then figuring out what's behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, you're thinking, what is it like to not have to think about other people's feelings? And I wonder if he thinks, oh gosh, I wish I could tune in a little more.
Yeah.
It'd
probably make our marriage a little easier.
We all have virtues and deficits and sometimes, the thing that we look to as a virtue in somebody else, maybe they even think about it's a deficit in themselves.
I don't want to give up my superpower.
Yeah.
Like I do think I love that. I think sometimes it's a bit much. Mm-hmm. Like can we just turn down the volume on that a little bit? Well,
I remember in high school, English class when we got to the Greek epic tragedies, the hero's greatest strength was also always their greatest weakness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what made them interesting, is it wasn't just this, one of the biggest complaints about Superman, whether it's in the comics or the movies, is that he's too perfect. They had to invent kryptonite just to give him some kind of conflict, because otherwise, why doesn't he just come in and, crush the car that the bank robbers are trying to get away with, and then the story's over in one page?
Right.
So they had to give him something to make him interesting. And I think that, part of the work that I've done is realizing that those things that I look at in myself and I say, oh, those are deficits. The more I learn about myself and the more I begin to integrate and continue to integrate my own story, what I realize is that that's a healthy way of me realizing I have limitations. And it's a healthy way of me being able to practice intimacy by going to others in humility and saying, I have this limitation. Can you help me? That kind of thing.
But it's that self-awareness that's so important, that once you start to understand yourself a little more, you can, it offers freedom to go to somebody and say that. Which
the freedom's always there.
Sure.
I would say it gives an opportunity to exercise courage and in doing that. Like, we've never not had the freedom. We've always had it. It's just we haven't known how to grab hold.
I think it gives the awareness, which can lead to like self-acceptance, and that can lead to exercising that freedom. Yeah.
I think it's the ability to own your story. In the addiction world, 12 steps programs don't just have the 12 steps, they also have the 12 promises. So it's like, if you practice the 12 steps, you will receive these 12 promises, and one of them is to be able to look back on your past without feeling shame. And I think that's something that seems so impossible to some people. How in the world do you know what I've done? Oh my goodness. But it doesn't mean looking back and not saying, I would think I would do that different if I had a chance again. But it's in realizing, where I'm at right now, I'm here because those things happened and I made choices and I had to make other choices and so on and so forth. And so if you get, I think you have to get to the place where you begin to like yourself before you can look back and kind of take those pieces that maybe you'd like to keep in the storage trunk, to take those pieces in and own them. And then be able to say, like you said, I do have these limitations, you know, and reach out and ask other people to meet those needs, to help you with those limitations. Yeah. Taking it back to the movie, what, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name in the movie. Margaret. Yes, that was my great-grandmother's name. So in the movie, you've got this employer-employee relationship. He's what, like an executive assistant? Yeah. That kind of thing? Yeah, so just jump how high. That was basically their...
Yeah, I would say almost somewhat abusive.
Somewhat? I mean, yeah. He literally, at the beginning... after he spills the coffee, pays another guy for a shirt so he can hand her his coffee so that she won't, I don't know, explode or something.
Explode or fire him. Or,
Hey, everybody, this is Josh, and I'm interrupting the episode to ask for your help in getting more people into the theater. I'd love to see Therapist Theater make a dent on the iTunes podcast lists. And the best way to do that is by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a 5-star review. You can do that now by visiting the show's page in the podcast app. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for helping to spread the word about Therapist Theater. All right, back to the show. So they
hadn't been home in 3 years because of this job, working so much, missed holidays. Yeah. Was going to miss his grandmother's 90th.
Although, to be fair, birthday. It wasn't like home was just driving 20 minutes.
I mean, that's true.
He had to take 2 planes to get home.
Alaska.
Which makes it even tougher, I think.
Oh, And one was probably a pretty long flight.
Yeah.
I would guess.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. You know, going home for me, 7.5-hour drive, which it's not my favorite, but it's doable. Like, I could jump in a car right now and go home. Not exactly the case for him. But they get put in this position where the power dynamic almost flips because she's from Canada.
And it switches on a dime.
Yeah. And then she gets called into an office where her bosses basically say, we've been contacted by immigration. Your work visa has been taken away. You got to leave the country. And she kind of improvises. Oh, no, actually, we're in love and we're going to get married. And can I just stay now?
And like proposes this idea in front of her bosses for the first time.
Proposes, good one. Boom.
Yeah, pun intended. In front of Andrew was his name.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you talking about? We're getting married? What?
Yeah. One of the common threads in the show is I usually forget character names. So, like, don't feel...
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Every character is their actor's name.
I actually wrote them down so that I would, like, try to remember.
Oh, I did. So, the episode that came out a few weeks ago on the movie How to Be Single, I had to put, like, a chart of all the characters' names and relationships because they all went to each other at some...
That was with my friend Jenny.
Yeah. So this power dynamic switches, and for the first time...
You're going to have to cut this, but funny story. We actually saw that movie together the day before I met my husband.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why do I got to cut that?
Oh, no, you don't have to cut that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wonder if that affected your ability to be open in any way, that movie.
Well, I had met him on Bumble like a week before. I don't really think so.
Okay.
I would love to say that it did.
Yeah.
But there was something different about him from the start, like, and me and just the way that we interacted. Like.
Okay, so wait, give me the. So dating apps like Bumble. So that's just that, like, a woman has the ability to kind of control, does this proceed or not, or. Yeah.
So when you match. You know, like, oh, swipe right, I like him.
So similar swiping thing as to Tinder.
Exactly. But this Bumble is different because the girl has to open the conversation. So just because a guy matches doesn't mean that he can.
And on Tinder, he can open the conversation, or anybody
either
can?
One.
Okay.
Yeah. So if a girl has second thoughts, like, oh, I don't really want to talk to you, even though we've matched. He can't converse with her on the app.
What does the Bumble name mean then?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I don't know what the Tinder name means. Like,
Yeah. I've heard, like, a little bit of history. Like, I think Bumble, I don't know if this is true or if it's, like, urban hearsay, but that the founder of Bumble was dating the guy who created Tinder and then created Bumble. That could totally be false, but that's what after they broke up, she started her own thing.
Wow. So it didn't start as a dating app exclusively for beekeepers?
I don't think so.
There's a farmers only.
I mean, that is true.
It's a real thing.
I can hear the jingle in my head right now.
Yes. Yes. There was a period of time where I think I saw that commercial pop up on YouTube a ton, and I'm like, what is this algorithm trying to say?
Yeah. You're a hillbilly. No, I'm just
kidding.
Farmers
well, I'm from South Carolina, so who knows?
Yeah.
So this power dynamic shifts in Margaret and Andrew's relationship, like you said, on a dime. And it seems like for the first time, it's her having to exercise some vulnerability.
That's exactly what I was
At least the
thinking.
first time in a long time.
Yeah.
Because she basically has to say, I have a need. Can you meet it? I don't know. Can you go along with it?
Can you help me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all through the first part of the movie, you know, you don't realize until later that she even has any vulnerabilities. Of course, everybody does, but she's done a really good job and seems to be unaffected by people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly the first one that comes out is, I'm getting kicked out the country. Can you help me stay in it? Mm-hmm. Which he immediately exploits to say, hey, I want a promotion. I don't want it later. I want it now.
Sure.
You know, go along with this, or I'll just go back in there and tell him, you know, which part of me is like, yeah, good for him. You know, good for him for seeing an open door and walking through it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how he works really hard, and when she says jump, he says how high, but he never seemed to really lose himself.
Really? Because he hadn't been home in 3 years.
Sure. I think he denied himself for sure. And we can talk about whether or not that's different, but well, and he kept his eye on his goal partly, maybe I'm wrong, because his relationship with his dad, he needed to prove himself. Mm-hmm. So he probably put up with all of those things because going home also would mean facing his father, who didn't approve of the career choice or the position that he was in. So maybe he did lose a little bit of himself. But.
Well, and certainly with any movie, you know, we get an hour and a half, a 2-hour snippet of a bigger story. Mm-hmm. So we got to color in the lines a little bit.
Sure.
You know, it's not going to show us everything.
Yeah.
But I mean,
if he showed up in either of our offices, we would have plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
With him. But he was mindful enough to take the opportunity when he had it.
Yeah. Yeah. To exploit somebody's weakness.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a great relationship all the way around.
Yeah. I think the losing himself thing is interesting to me, though, just because it does seem like he's able to maintain his personality.
Yes. I guess that's what I'm...
But it makes me wonder, you know, how much of a life has he lost because he's chosen, you know, this particular, not even career, this particular person to latch onto in pursuit of a career. Because certainly there's other publishing houses.
Right. That's a question that's definitely not answered in the movie. Yeah. I mean, they do mention that she's like the best, you know, like highly regarded in their field, and maybe he did want to be hitched to her.
And you see that because at the beginning she gets this one author, Frank, to go on Oprah, who you're led to believe is like a recluse that nobody can get to do interviews. She fires a guy at the beginning because she said, get that guy to do Oprah. He didn't. She got him to do Oprah. So why do I need you now?
Yeah.
You're gone.
Well, he tells his father, too, that she's very good when they're having a conversation about how she should be respected and those types of things. But, yeah, she's a get-her-done kind of girl.
I think it's interesting, though, and I don't think I thought about this till what we've just talked about, but, you know, certainly she is denying at the beginning that she has needs. I think he is, too.
Yeah.
Because he has just, you know, it's the classic workaholic. It's if I completely devote myself, submerge myself in the work, then I don't have to deal with X, Y, and Z. Which, you know, if we go back Enneagram, you know, one thing that I have seen in my, you know, because I've got a couple of books I've been reading on it. In the 6, the drive is the fear of the loss of safety and security. And it said in unhealth, a 6 can go 3, the achiever. So like in unhealth, it's the tuck your head, do. You know, so I kind of identify with that in that, you know, there may be some stuff happening inside of him. And you see later on this relationship with his dad.
Yeah, you know, I mean, his dad wants him to come home and take over the family businesses. They live in this small community in Alaska. Which
family businesses makes it sound like it's a, you know, a tiny shop or something.
Right, no.
They kind of like own the town.
Yeah,
like
multiple businesses, their names everywhere.
Yeah.
They live in a gigantic, beautiful
They live in a
home.
castle.
Yeah.
You know, so they've gorgeous. Got all of the money.
All of the money. And his dad wants him to come over and take the business.
Yeah, and his dad's like, here, take all this money. Do the business. Take all the money. Yeah. But there's something inside of him that wants something different.
Right.
So he does have this drive to prove himself. He does have this, But also, I mean, if he's a real person, if he's anything like anybody else, there's hurt and there's pain because of the relationship with the dad.
Yeah.
And so to a certain degree, I'm sure that the diving so headfirst into the job, it probably has some kind of relation to that.
Absolutely.
Proving
She's
myself
the best.
proving myself to dad means dad will love me. Dad will accept me.
Mm-hmm.
Dad will say, great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's the best one. So if I can just stick it out with her, I'll put myself in a position that my dad will finally see.
How could dad deny me?
Mm-hmm.
How could dad not say good job? Because if she's the best and I'm with her, I'm
Right.
the best.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the top.
So I'll do whatever I need to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Including buying a shirt off a guy.
And ordering the same coffee as her in case yours spills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, as a 6, that's just being prepared, though. I've thought about every worst case scenario. I got them all covered.
I mean, he did have it covered.
Yeah. Yep. So they each have these vulnerabilities that they're not, these needs that they're not having met, that they're not willing to access, however you want to phrase it. And this scenario kind of brings them out in both of them.
Yeah. Well, as you already said, she has a big vulnerability of like being kicked out of the country and then losing her job because she can't work for at least a year.
Which is probably her whole self is the job.
Right. Her entire identity is wrapped up in her job. And he is once again like put in front of his family, I think, which it's hard to deny when it's right in your face for both of them.
Yeah. So I think that one of the big changes that comes about in her is because of his family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What goes on inside of you when you see her as like an outsider? And especially you mentioned, when I first saw this, there was something in me that lit up, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't come online to it till a little bit later. Is there anything inside of you now that when you see the movie and you see her enter into his family, is there anything in you that kind of meshes with that at all? Like, what do you see happening there?
In my own story.
Yeah, or just as a person.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things is just the acceptance they have of her is something that I noticed. Like she comes in her high heels and her stuffy ponytail and her pencil skirt.
She's always got the BlackBerry, holding it like this in her hand.
And her, fancy luggage. And the family notices that. They're like, okay, but they don't immediately shun her. They don't throw her away. They still invite her in, even though they're noticing these imperfections in her. And I think through that acceptance.
Or perfections. I mean.
Yeah.
Because, they are not well off. But they're looking at her and saying, look at her luggage, look at her shoes,
right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's their acceptance that starts to help her to melt, some of those protective parts away.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it the transitive property of love.
That's a fancy name.
It is. I need to trademark it before somebody steals it. So in like high school geometry or whatever, you learn the transitive property, A plus B equals C. No. It's if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's the transitive property. So they don't know her at all.
Yeah.
But they know and love him. And then when they're told that he loves her and she shows up, that's enough for them.
Yep.
We love you. You're in.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I know that this is certainly a part of my story. So coming from a broken home, my parents divorced, after Leigh-Ann and I got married, her parents are still together. Her family, big extended family, very, very involved, supportive, loving. And, here I am showing up and being used to a family system working, this certain way coming from where I'm from, and being introduced into a system that works a very different way, and just certainly feeling that culture clash. And I think you kind of see that in her. And it was something that I think I tried, because I tend to, go up into my head. I tried to understand it. Wait, you don't even know me. And you're saying that you like me and you love me. And I don't understand that. And then finally just kind of getting the transitive thing of, oh, but they love her and she loves me. And so that's enough. That's enough for them. They don't need any other reasons. Certainly that relationship's going to grow. They're going to get more reasons. But as a foundation, that's enough.
Yeah.
And I think that, it certainly seems to be something that she struggles with as well. Yeah. It's just coming from one place, and entering into a place that's different. Different's never bad, but it's, or I shouldn't say different doesn't have to be bad. But I think, coming from a family of origin that operates in this kind of almost avoidant attachment style, to come into one where there is a secure attachment, just feels what? There's almost like a whiplash. And so there's just so many times where, I've got to continue to process that, because I do find myself to have reactions or instincts to want to, I don't know, maybe pull back, or just because in my past, that's how you stay safe. That's how you, or maybe not even safe. That's just how it's done.
Yeah.
That's the tradition or whatnot. But I think to recognize, oh no, wait, that's not right. That's not wrong.
Sure.
That's just the way it is. And that's not the way it is over here.
Right.
And it's cool to be able to have the opportunity to, kind of recognize that and choose to continue to walk forward into it, and know that, maybe, Leigh-Ann and her love for me was my ticket in. That was enough at the beginning, but that isn't where it stays. So it's not like I've got to stay on her arm in the house if I want to be related to, but rather, all right, that got me in the door, but now I belong and I'm here, and now I'm me.
Yeah.
I'm not just Leigh-Ann's husband. I'm Josh.
Do they live locally?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. South Carolina.
Okay.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're my family and her family about 2 hours apart.
Gotcha.
So when we go back, we hit one and then we go to the other. And it's just close enough, but also it's weird because they're both far away. So,
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you. My family lives in Missouri and his lives in Minnesota. So at Christmas time, we make the loop, but that's really the only time we ever get
geographical. To see. So I know Minnesota's cold. I could not point on a map and tell you where it's at.
It's the one that looks like a mitten.
That's
north.
Michigan.
Oh, shoot. Will you cut that? It's the one with 10,000 lakes.
Does it touch Canada?
Yes.
Okay.
But Minneapolis is the southern part.
Okay.
Yeah, Missouri gets cold too, but Minnesota, their winters are longer. I don't like the cold.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I didn't go to Covenant Seminary. When I went there for the interview, it was 19 below when I landed.
In St. Louis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can get that way.
And I was like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to.
It doesn't normally get that cold, but every once in a while, for sure.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we make that loop in the wintertime, so that's great when it's cold everywhere.
Ooh.
We just go to all the cold places.
Yeah. What do you think happens in the movie that begins the change?
For her?
Yeah.
I think the first inkling that I picked up on that I can remember right now was when his dad came into the party. So they had arrived, surprise to them. There's a bunch of people that came over to see him. And his dad enters the room and immediately starts dogging on him for his job. And I think she first starts to get to see him as a person, because she sees his reaction, what he's up against. And he leaves, and she's like, charming. And so I think that's when the start happens, I feel like, on a very small level.
Yeah. She sees into, oh, here's a person and not just a role, my assistant or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I thought it was when she was trying on the grandma's wedding dress.
Oh.
Because it's like the grandma... Is the necklace the mom's or is it the grandma's as well?
Yeah, I think it was the grandma's.
Okay, so it's grandma, like, choosing to share these very meaningful things with her.
Yeah, because it had been passed down.
Yeah. She says, I think maybe her grandmother made the dress or something like that. But just choosing, it's not the same as just sharing a meal. It's not the same as just having them invited into the home to share the home. But it's like sharing the wedding dress and the necklace.
Yeah.
Clearly this very meaningful thing.
I think she started to feel really unworthy. Like, she was very in touch with what she felt was unworthiness at the time. Of, you guys are real people. I can't.
I think that's the first time it became real. I think up until then it was just, I'm just playing this part. And then all of a sudden, oh no, this is really, really real.
And it doesn't affect just me and even just him, but it affects more people outside of us.
Yeah, it's like the first time that she could see the Leigh's hands reaching out and touching people besides her and Andrew.
Yeah.
So I think there's something that happens in that moment where she goes, oh.
I think that's definitely a key moment.
Yeah. And then what's interesting to me, though, is you see on her face, which, Sandra Bullock, Oscar winner, so good. But, like, you see on her face you see the internal stuff happening.
Yeah.
It's in that slow, like, they're talking, but her face kind of goes still and she kind of looks down, that internal, which I've seen on clients' faces, people have seen on my face, and it's this, all of a sudden, internal evaluation of, oh man, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah, the realization of what have I gotten ourselves into, and what do I do with that? Was that before or after their late night conversation?
Before.
Is it? Because then that night...
Because I think the late night conversation... So, like, she has these moments with different members of the family. She has the wedding dress moment with the mom and the grandma. She has the fireside moment with the grandma.
Yeah.
She has a moment with Andrew's ex-girlfriend. She has a moment with... oh, my gosh, I can't remember Oscar from The Office's name in the movie. But, like, she all these places where the transitive... Yes, where the transitive property... is like in full effect with her, these people who care so much for him, and that they're now caring and accepting and inviting and relating to her.
Yeah.
I think the late night conversation was the first time that she realized, oh, I'm going to give him some of me. It was almost like all of those other moments had added up and built this thing in her where, you know what, I am going to open up that door. I'm going to crack that door a bit. I'm going to let him in, and give him some of me. In a way that wasn't just, here's some fun facts that you can tell the immigration detective so you can rattle them off. Like actual meaningful things about her.
Well, I think one of the things that she did to protect herself was that she didn't see people as people. She didn't see him as a person and think about all of her demands and what they did to him. And I think that being with those people and feeling that then also made her... see him as a person.
Yeah.
And maybe even allow herself to be a person.
Yeah. Which I think the fireside moment, I think that was part of that. Because grandma was down there, doing a very specific thing. And then she invites her, hey, you do this. Like, you do a thing with the spirits or with nature or whatever. And she does, but it's not the same as grandma. It's her. Yeah. It's very much her own
Well, and she lets go.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about dance being an expression and a movement of your body, but she had always been uptight. I mean, everything that from the things that she wore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Were
I hadn't
very
thought
closed
about that.
off.
Yeah, and very tight, so that she couldn't like move.
Well, you notice in the movie, in the beginning, she's wearing the very tight pencil skirt, the very high heels. She can barely move. And her hair is in a slicked back high ponytail. And it's in Alaska that her hair starts to come down. Her clothes start to become a little looser, more
Pants.
inviting.
Yeah.
And I think the fireside dance was, I mean, kind of letting go that she never allowed herself to do. Because I even remember thinking, the song that she sings and he, sees and he questions it. And she's like, it just came to mind and went with the beat. And I was like, how often do you think that she does that? Like, probably not very often.
Yeah.
That she's listening to that song and letting herself, like, be expressive and just go.
Yeah. Just be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then this change that, what do you got?
I was just going to say the nighttime talk always stands out to me.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear so much more about her and learn that her parents died when she was 16 and she's been on her own since then. And you think, well, that at least could partially explain kind of why she is the way that she is and why she might feel the need to protect herself.
Yeah, the swallows tattoo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's clearly an attachment injury. I mean, losing the two primary attachment figures in her life at such a young age. It's such a formative age to then enter into a stage of life where, I can't depend on anybody else because I don't have anybody else to depend on. I can only depend on me.
Yep.
So then I would wonder if after that maybe she tried and maybe got hurt, and then made that decision, shut that off and said, all right, well, I've got to treat people as commodities now so that I don't allow myself to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which the late night conversation does come after the shower incident too, which is a whole nother side of vulnerability.
The shower.
Yeah, she's in the shower. She doesn't have a towel.
I was thinking marriage shower.
The dog's
like,
out there.
There's a shower?
No, yeah. Play on words.
There was a stripper, but I didn't remember a shower. Yes, the shower incident where they're both naked. Yeah. Which could potentially be symbolic.
I think it is. I mean, in the movie, it's definitely a depiction of, not being able to hide, being fully open.
Yeah. I like it because she didn't plan that one. She didn't do that one. That was kind of forced vulnerability. And then I just think the nighttime conversation story is
fire, shower. She has these moments where it's forced vulnerability, so to speak. And I think what she sees is, I survived.
Yeah.
I can live. Like, vulnerability is not going to kill me.
Right.
Being open with somebody. And so...
And it kind of feels good.
Yeah. And so because she realizes she can live through it, then when she has the opportunity to choose, she chooses.
She chooses it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think relationally, I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, I think vulnerability, if you don't know how to do it or don't have decided not to do it, you don't just jump in full force, right? Like, she couldn't have come from New York and landed in Alaska and the first night have had that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are people that do it full force at the beginning, but I think they're doing it. I call it hiding out in the open. So, if I'm going to give you some things about me so that you won't ask about these other things. And I think that, that's not
strategic.
Yeah. That's not coming from a place of, I want intimacy. That's coming from a place of, I'm trying to throw down a smoke bomb like Batman and distract you while I run away.
Which I would say is not vulnerability.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fake. So yeah, they have that conversation. And I think that's another turn.
For sure.
Yeah. In her. What?
He, for the first time, sees her
Yeah.
as a human being.
I wonder, do you think that's the first time she notices him the first time at the party where he has that conversation with Dad? Do you think it's the first time he notices her as a real person?
I think it's the first time he allows himself to consider her that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's had to protect himself from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what was it? I was thinking about this a little while ago. What was it? What happens with her where she... Oh, I know what it is. Is it the thing in the barn where the dad has the guy? What makes her jump on the boat with him in it and drive off?
That was after the dress fitting, I think.
Really?
Yeah, because she's so upset over, like, your family. What is your family going to do? Like, he's like, we've both chosen this. Like, it's fine. She's like, what if they find out? Like, he's like, they're not going to find out. And she's freaking out because she's realizing she can hurt them.
There was something she said right there that stuck out with me where she said, I don't work in this type of family context.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember that, but that's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just recognizing it's like I was asking you earlier, like, you know, me coming from one type of family entering into this other and just kind of feeling that, you know, it's like a whiplash. It's like, whoa, I keep thinking I got to work this way, but that's not how it works here. I think it's her realizing like, oh, I don't work in this kind of context. And so something's got to change.
Yeah. And she just wants to run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know this. This is new.
That's the change that she thinks has to be. I've got to remove myself. When that's not what the family would want. That's not what, you know, if you make the covert overt, all cards on the table, that's not what anybody would want. But that's just the easy thing.
Yeah, she's looking for easy.
Just get out.
Yeah. Safer. But very lonely.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say safer. Seemingly safer.
For her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a risk, right? Any relationship is a risk. And so it is the idea of, I've done life for so many years this way. And she's definitely not in touch with her emotions. Like I think she's vaguely aware of them, but pushes them away so that it doesn't create any need for change. So walls up, isolation, I mean, I think almost always lead to loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
But outside of the walls is really scary.
Yeah, but then if you numb the loneliness too, which I think that's what the job had become.
That's what
to
work
her.
was for her.
Yeah,
definitely.
And the viewing people as commodities, like that's, I don't have to feel lonely because that's not a person. That's a way of me getting another, you know, checkbox in the list, another gold star, another addition to my roster of talent, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think Alaska for her was just like a continual melting of like this ice that she'd had around her for
It's
so
climate
long.
change.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that it melted in Alaska?
Yeah. So then the culmination is at the wedding. Well, first off, the family springs it on her. We're going to have, what if you got married?
She get married tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah. So like as somebody who planned a wedding, you know, what do you think would have gone on inside of you if the train had been moving in this one direction plan-wise for so long and then somebody was like, yeah, we're just going to have you get married tomorrow at the house?
Well, I think the situation's very different because my mind was, what if it's hideous? like what if the wedding is not at all what I would want? But that's not where her mind was. It was a business transaction. So, I mean, for her, it is just, oh, this is going to happen sooner. I mean, that
puts the pressure on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also makes it more real, just like the dress. Well, I guess that happened afterwards. But this is no longer just a concept, an idea that we're going to do this. Like, you are then faced with the reality of the repercussions afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in most relationships, you have time to kind of get used to that idea and grow together. And
yeah, you ramp up.
Yeah. None of that for her or him.
Yeah, it was a cannonball.
Yeah.
Which leads to her, of course, like, confession at the altar.
At the altar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I always think, isn't there a better time?
Well, what? She waited later? Like,
I mean, you walked down the aisle. When did you decide that this is what you were going to do? Like, when was the last moment of, as she was walking down the aisle, was she still like, am I not? Am I going to? Am I not? Like, or did she know as she was approaching him that, like, I have to do this. I just have to finish mustering up the courage.
That's one of my favorite questions to ask clients is why now? Mm-hmm. Like, what was it that made you, especially if you've lived in this tension for a little while, what made you decide to reach out now?
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting question for that character is, what was it about that moment? Mm-hmm. Was it just that was the absolute last moment that she could have before she was literally legally married to him?
Yeah.
You know, maybe. Because I think it was at some question that, I've already forgotten his name again.
Andrew.
No, not Andrew.
Ramon.
Yeah, I think Ramon was asking her, like, do you? Or, you know, one of those.
Yeah, had turned to her.
Oh, she raises her hand.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Not a question.
No, your hand is
Can I wait
up.
till later? No.
Yeah. But the truth is revealed.
Yeah.
And she bails, goes back home. He shows up, and that goes back to that moment you mentioned at the beginning. Is her saying, "Well, it would just be easier."
Yeah.
And him saying, "Yeah, it would. You're right. But let's do it anyway."
Yeah. Yeah, he's just saying you're worth it. And nobody, I think, has ever told her that before.
Yeah.
At least not in a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize that she did have feelings. The other thing that really stood out to me at one point in the movie is, like, when she fires the guy for not getting the writer to do Oprah, and he comes out spitting, like, all of these insults, and she just stands there and she's like, don't do it. And she's cool, calm, and collected. Looks like she's completely unfazed. And in that nighttime conversation, she says she went to the bathroom and cried afterwards.
Yeah.
And so she's a person. And then...
But cannot let other people see that she's a person.
No.
Yeah.
Because then that makes her vulnerable, of course. And so she's gone through all of that. And then at the end, you know, back in the office where it all started. And she has gone through this transformation. I wonder what it's like for her to be in that office and knowing, all, like, now being very aware that all of these people hate me. And now kind of having some of those protective layers melted away. And what that would feel like.
Yeah.
And then in he comes.
She allows herself to be vulnerable. She does tear up. She has that moment with him. What's interesting about that is, like, as far as story structure goes. So Joseph Campbell's The Journey of a Hero has all these different mile markers in a story. And it starts out as the hero is in his, like, natural element. There's a call to action. He has to, or he or she has to deny the call. But then something happens where it costs the hero something. He loses something, which is like a second call. So then he goes into action, meets the trials, has the conflict, goes through a change, accomplishes the mission, and then goes back to where he was as a different person. You know, and so that's her. Like, that's what happens. And here she's in the exact same room, surrounded by the workers who at the beginning were sending out texts like the witch is on a broom. Yeah. And here she is a different person, and because of that chooses something different in that moment. Yeah. And then is ultimately rewarded with relationship, intimacy. Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons I like it too is because it doesn't end with just, and I love you after this weekend, let's get married. And his line was, I'd like to marry you so I can date you. Yeah. Which I just think it puts, like, a real, like, we don't know if it's happily ever after, if they can make this work like we want them to, but they're going to get to know each other in that process. But she needs to be in the country. Yeah. For that to happen, I guess.
I like the moments that they've had where they've seen each other as people. They've chosen to be vulnerable. They've chosen that intimacy. And I like what you said about it's the first time somebody said you're worth it. I like that happened after he saw the fullness of her.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, you know, he certainly had an idea of who she was at the beginning that was shattered. Mm-hmm. But I think there was also this like second kind of thing where it was, okay, you're not this cold, feelingless person, but also, you know, that's just like seeing somebody and getting rid of all the deficits, the bad stuff. But also he sees even deeper, oh, you are a person who cares. You are a person who can sacrifice. You are a person who can tell the truth even when it costs her.
Yeah.
You are a person who sees me for who I am. You're a person who loves my family, who can love my family. And you know the lyrics to a Yin Yang Twins song. and he, you know, when he says, yeah, it would be easy, and then kisses her, it's like, you know, it's choosing the whole person.
The whole package.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the reasons, as you're saying that I like this movie so much, is that instead of being an object of affection from afar, like the guy likes the pretty girl, and then we like see that come through, like she's beautiful and he recognizes that, but he doesn't have any attraction to her until he gets to know,
he sees what's underneath,
like the deeper part of her, and then that's when he's drawn to her.
It's like the anti-Grease.
Oh yeah,
because one of the things that always bothered me the most about Grease is in the end Sandy completely changes everything about her look, her attitude, everything.
Smoking a cigarette,
and then they get together. So it's like, hey everybody, if you want the guy,
change who you are.
Change everything about who you are. And in this case, it was like who she really was drawn out of her. And it was because she became who she really is.
Right.
You know, Margaret became more Margaret. That's what attracted him, and that's what he wanted. Yeah. So she didn't have to become an Alaskan. She didn't have to become, you know, somebody who, you know, does what. She just became who she is. Yeah. And that's what he loved.
I mean, it's that saying that, like, perfectionism doesn't bring people to you. It's never going to earn you love. But vulnerability is what draws people to you. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and vulnerability really upsets the apple cart. Like, if you're not a person who's used to practicing that, when somebody comes and is vulnerable with you, you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah. Well, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And I think the nature of vulnerability is very magnetic. If somebody, you know, shares a need, if they share a part of their story that is vulnerable, I think there is an unspoken natural invitation in that for you to bring your whole self to. Yeah. And if you're up for the challenge, that's great. If it's something you're not used to, it's very weird. What do I do now? What do you?
Yeah, you don't know how to do it. I think that's the thing, is that people are like, well, I'm such an, like, about a lot of different things, but I'm such and such years old. Like, this shouldn't be so hard, or I should be able to know how to do this. And it's like, no, you really shouldn't. It's not just something that if you weren't taught it, showed it growing up, like, you have to learn that somewhere. Yeah. And anything that you learn has a learning curve.
And it takes time.
Yeah.
And very rarely is it easy at the beginning.
Yeah. So for them, like, fast forward, she's not going to just know how to do vulnerability well. Like, they have like, it's not going to be easy. Right. Like they said, right? Like, they're both going to have to learn over and over again how to be vulnerable after they've chosen each other.
It's very much like lifting weights or any kind of exercise. Like, you've gotta keep doing it, and you've gotta, you know, have the courage to do something that's tougher than the last thing you did, and that's what's gonna strengthen those muscles and allow you to continue to keep choosing it.
Yeah, I think she was able to. She had the opportunity in a very compact time have different experiences where she at least viewed it and witnessed it by people who did it well.
But I think even doing it poorly counts. I think,
oh, for sure.
I think even trying and it not going well, I still think it counts.
Yeah, but she got a chance to see it modeled for her, I think is my point. Whether you do it well or not, it is about baby steps.
Well, I just mean, like, she was able to see vulnerability displayed and met in what you may call quote unquote successful ways with like grandma's relationship to almost everybody, mom's relationship, but then in ways that weren't necessarily quote unquote successful with like him and his dad, you know? And I think that in all of those cases, she's getting to witness people putting their needs out there, people putting their fears out there, their weaknesses, and sometimes getting met, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But things staying together and everybody still staying alive.
Yeah, it didn't kill her.
Yeah.
Kill them.
So here's a question I want to ask you. In your work so far, what's something that you've learned from your clients?
I think one of the things that I get most from my clients is what they model for me. I think I've mentioned modeling a few times. I learn a lot from modeling and like observing people, and just the courage and the strength that they have is so inspiring. You know, occasionally I'll be sitting with somebody and like I'm challenged because they're facing something that's hard, and I'll like in the back of my mind like think of something that I'm like maybe avoiding or scares me, and I just think, well, what they're dealing with something much harder than that, you know, and they're continuing to dig in and to face it and to be curious and to explore those things. And I think that's the thing that I get maybe most from them, I don't know, is just their courage.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And I think that's because courage can't exist in the absence of fear. I've said in an episode before, it's like my favorite line from Game of Thrones, like at all. Book and series is in the first episode where Ned is talking to Bran after he had to behead somebody, and he's like, do you understand why I did this and all that? And then his son says something about, I want to be brave and not be afraid like you are. And his dad
not only
says,
to ask for help, but to go into those places that maybe you've been afraid that are
for him
dark
to be brave.
or that you've been avoiding for a long time.
I like that so much because it opens up this room that, you know, you don't have to be unaffected and be not afraid to be brave. In fact, you have to be brave. Yeah. Courage is the recognition of fear and the choice to act in spite of it. Or in the presence of it.
There's a Ben Affleck and Gwyneth Paltrow old movie. I don't even remember what it was. The only thing I remember about it is they were in a car having a conversation, and one of the lines is, "It's not brave if you're not scared." I mean, I think it's probably part of everybody's story to some degree, but I know that's part of my story.
Yeah.
Is just, that hurts. I don't really want to go there.
And I think it's one of the things that we as therapists get is we get to continually see these incredible individuals face challenges with courage.
Yeah.
And so we do get to have models in front of us all the time of what it looks like to be brave and what it looks like to recognize the fear and choose to walk forward anyway. And it's just a tremendous, tremendous gift that we continue to get to have these stories that we get to observe and have small parts in of these just incredible people. So let's say that somebody was listening today and that they felt like they could really connect with you and they would love to see you as a client. How could they get a hold of you?
The easiest way would be through email, and it uses my maiden name, Lucy at LucyDavidsonCounseling.com. Should probably update it to Lucy Wright. I just hyphenated it right now. Lucy Davidson Wright. Eventually the Davidson will be dropped, but Lucy at LucyDavidsonCounseling.com.
Cool. So they'll shoot you an email.
Yep.
And see about getting hooked up that way.
Absolutely.
Nice. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
It has been the absolute best. Yeah. The proposal, buy, rent, or pass?
Buy.
Buy?
I own it.
Boom. I love it. Cool. Hello, my love.
Hey.
What is the goings on with you?
I'm just doing my best. That's this week's motto. And at the beginning of this week, I told Josh, listeners, I told him that my motto this week was going to be I'm doing my best. And I really am a predictor of the future. It's like I knew that this week was going to be a lot. And
it's Tuesday, Lemon.
Yeah, and it has been. And so I really am doing my best. But things are good, you know. Work is good. It's busy. I had a weird situation with my Postmates lunch today.
Also going on this week is that we are mere days away from our vacation.
Yes.
Next week, when you hear from us, you will be hearing from us from beach chairs in the surf with our toes in the water, butts in the sand.
Yep.
And I can't remember the rest of the Zac Brown lyric.
Oh, I don't even know that song.
Well, we're going to listen to it on repeat all the way there. It's going to be glorious.
I hope not.
It's either going to be that or Old Town Road. So
gross. Everyone. Let me just give you a little peek behind the curtain. Joshua Treese, for some reason, has discovered Old Town Road. And
late in the game.
For some reason, likes it. And keeps playing it on repeat as if it's like the greatest song in the world.
But in fairness, I'm not just playing the Lil Nas X Billy Ray Cyrus version. I'm also playing the Walk Off the Earth version, and I'm also playing the Kids Bop version.
None of these things you're saying are making it better.
I'm only hearing items entered into the pro column.
Oh, boy. So that's been happening.
If I could find a Spanish version, I would definitely play that.
If you could find, have you looked? I don't think it'd be that hard to find.
I will look as soon as we're done recording this. Thank you for encouraging me to.
No! Make it stop.
Yeah, so we've got that to look forward to. We're coming to you from a remote location next week. So you had a chance to listen to the interview with Lucy about the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you love the movie.
I sure do.
What were your thoughts on what we talked about?
It was great. Yeah. I loved hearing about Lucy, and it was really funny to hear that, like, wasn't it this movie that she said she saw with her best friend, and then the next day she met her husband? Anyways, I thought that was cool. And I really I think I've said this a couple times, but she talked about feeling like she was made for therapy. And I just always really connect with stuff like that because I feel like I was made for social work. Like I feel similarly about what I do. And so I just connect and like identify with it. And I always think it's cool hearing from people who have that in them as well. In fact, like one of the things she said in that part, like when she was talking about why therapy, she talked about how she's not afraid of feelings and how she thought that helped her. And I really liked that. I liked that thought. And I think that is something that makes therapy and therapists, who have that quality just safe people to emotionally process with. Like if they're not afraid to engage in feelings, that's part of what I think encourages people to engage in their own feelings. And it also made me wonder if that, and not that she would like need to answer this, but like I wondered if that came naturally or if it came through going through stuff where she had to like engage deeply in her own emotions, because I think it can happen both ways. Like I think I would say for me, and I'm an Enneagram type 2, since you talk a lot about the Enneagram on here, like I've always felt I just engage in my feelings a lot. I just always have been like a deep feeler and like all about the feelings. And so I think that it can happen either way. Like I think there are people who naturally are more emotion based people. And so it's probably a little less like they probably are not as afraid of feelings as somebody who might be more head centered, who hasn't necessarily come down into the feelings. Yeah, I don't know. Another thing that was really interesting was and I feel like I'm going to wind through like where this was in the interview, because I don't remember everything that you talked about when this came up, but I think it was in a part when you were asking her like why she connects to the movie. And then somewhere in that answer, she said that either herself or like Sandra Bullock's character at the end of the movie sort of sees that she was worth it. Like she was worth this guy, you know, doing all the things and getting to know her and like being vulnerable. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's the big selling point for rom-coms in general. Like I have had that phrase go through my head when I think about, or when I like love a rom-com, or when I see something in a rom-com that I'm like, oh, I wish that would happen to me. Like I remember being younger and being like, oh, like I just hope one day I'm worth that to somebody. Like that idea that you're worth the big gesture, like you're worth the, you know, running in the airport deal at the end of the movie. I think that's probably a big thing that sells rom-coms, you know, because that's such a deep, and I think it's a really common desire in people. So she hit the nail on the head. She figured out why rom-coms sell.
Wow. The mystery's been solved.
Yeah.
Also, as you were saying that, I was thinking, just for the listener's sake, could you define what rom-com is the abbreviation of? But then...
Romedy Comantic. It's a romantic comedy, you guys.
Romantic comedy. And if it was a romantic comedy starring Aziz Ansari's character from Parks and Rec, it would be a Tom rom-com.
No.
And if it was about him as an undead person come back to life, it would be a Zom-Tom rom-com. And if it was about him... Wait, no, I got more. If it was about him as a cheerleader zombie from Parks and Rec, it would be a pom-pom Zom-Tom rom-com.
For the sake of the listeners, I'm going to stop you now.
I have 5 more.
I know. We don't need to hear them, but I appreciate them, and you're very talented.
Of course, wait. If it was about...
No.
Wait, I got one more.
No.
If it was about... This is my show.
To hear
if
this.
It was about the mother of the cheerleader undead character from Parks and Rec, it would be a mom pom-pom Zom-Tom rom-com.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. The last thing really that I remember, like, and this is an interesting, like, winding thought, so bear with me. It was when you had been talking about the Enneagram, which, P.S., I thought she sounded a lot like a 2 as well. But then when she talked about, like, the 9, sometimes, I forgot the words that she used, but basically can sometimes kind of be different types depending on what's needed. That's super fascinating. And every time I hear about the Enneagram, I just kind of want to learn more. Anyways, when you guys were talking about the Enneagram, and she shared that her husband is an 8. And so one of the things that they differ on is that it seems like really naturally sort of picks up on other people's feelings. And that maybe just isn't like one of his natural gifts or things that he does. And then you went into talking about how, she sees that as a strength in him sometimes, and maybe he sees it as a limitation, and maybe he sees her connecting with people's emotions as a strength. And from there, you got to strengths and weaknesses, and like sharing your weaknesses and vulnerabilities with people. And she said there can be freedom in that, like freedom in saying, your weaknesses or vulnerabilities. And then you said the freedom is always there and has always been there. It's just like having the courage to like take that step and share your vulnerability. So here's where my brain went. A, I do think that's true. And I think like in relationships, especially, that's a giant moment of like taking the step, being courageous, sharing, you know, vulnerabilities and weaknesses. But I also think I don't want somebody to listen to that and maybe somebody who didn't have a safe childhood or isn't in a safe relationship or like hasn't had an emotionally safe, you know, like childhood or people around them. I wouldn't want someone to hear that and think like, oh, it's just because I didn't have courage. Because I think there are times where the freedom is not there. It's because it's not safe. So like the freedom is there if somebody is wanting to hear your vulnerability and like is loving and, you know, absolutely in a loving relationship, like that is a step and it's wonderful. But like the person has to be emotionally safe first. So like there are situations where the freedom is not always there, I guess, is what my brain ended on.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think that, you know, trying to remember back to kind of the headspace I was in when I was saying that is I think I was imagining the conversation or the freedom being with safe people. Mm-hmm. But I think it is good to highlight, you know, we may not always have safe people in our life. Mm-hmm. And so if that is the case, you know, then that is different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely, I mean, I think, and I knew that that's what you meant. And I think everybody else did too. I think my head went to, I don't want somebody to listen to it and think and like shame themselves, you know, if it's
absolutely.
not safe.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
That's all.
Nice. I thought of another one. So
oh my gosh,
if that character from Parks and Rec who is undead and a cheerleader, and it's also about his mom, and that mom is sick, then it would be a Vom Mom Pom Pom Tom rom-com.
Wow.
That's the bomb. Nailed it.
I don't have anything to add.
Nailed it. Well, if you don't have anything to add,
no.
I think it's been a tremendously long day.
Very
and
much so.
Because of that, I think that it's safe to say that we should raise the lights, lower the curtain, and at least for this week, say that the theater is closed.